Council Mobility and Infrastructure Committee meeting to order, October 25th, 2022. And looking at the agenda this evening, we're going to be looking at one item tonight. First, I will see if there are any people in the audience that would want to give public comment. We're still in a hybrid situation right now, but there are multiple opportunities for public comment at tonight's meeting. There's a general public comment opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, and after the presentation, members of the public are encouraged to also give their input. Are we on air?
We're not on air at the moment.
Do I have to start all over again? Good evening. Today is October 25th, 2022. I'll call the City Council Mobility and Infrastructure Committee meeting to order. I'll take roll now. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Here.
Deputy Council President Hall.
Here.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming tonight. We'll start by starting with public comment. There are multiple opportunities for public comment in tonight's meeting. There's a general public comment opportunity at the beginning of the meeting, or members of the public may make comments after the presentation of tonight's agenda item and the council question and answer period. Members of the public may address the council at this time, in person or virtually. Do we have any members of the public that are online that would like to speak? I don't see anyone in the council chambers right now.
Chair Joe, no one has signed up to speak, and there are no virtual attendees at the moment.
Fantastic. For those that are online that may want to join later, to make comments, please raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, press *3. We'll look for your cues that you'd like to make additional comment after the presentation of our one item on the agenda this evening. That'll move us on to item number 3, approval of minutes. Have members of the committee had a chance to view the draft minutes from September 13th, 2022? Do I have a motion?
I would move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Hearing no discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 3-0. This now takes us to agenda item 4A, ID 1284, Transit Plan Public Engagement, excuse me. And we have Thomas Valdez, Senior Transportation Planner. Thomas, I hope I pronounced that name correctly. If I didn't, please correct me, but the show's all yours.
Thanks, Councilmember Joe. I'll just wait to get screen share capabilities, and then I'll begin my presentation. Yeah, still waiting on screen sharing abilities. If someone could enable that, I can begin my presentation. Great. So I'm ready. Perfect. Well, yeah, nice to meet everybody. My name is Thomas Valdez, Senior Transportation Planner, and today I'll be discussing the Transit Study Community Engagement Plan. So to begin, I'll just start by providing some useful background to describe why we're studying transit. I'll then walk through the study's proposed community engagement plan and ask for the committee's feedback. And lastly, I'll conclude the presentation by providing a preview of what's coming down the pike. So before I begin, just wanted to pause here and share with you the two primary questions that staff is hoping to get feedback on from the committee. The first question is, does the proposed community engagement plan meet the goal of engaging with diverse voices from the community, especially those with a higher dependence on transit services? The second question is, are there any additional community interests or audiences that we're missing from our key audiences and stakeholders list found in attachment B of your packet? So please keep these two questions in mind, and I'll begin this presentation. So just to provide a little bit of background, as the committee knows, the Issaquah has been growing pretty significantly. Over the last 20 years, the population has more than doubled here, and there's expected growth coming in the future. In advance of this future anticipated growth, the city has been proactively planning for high capacity transit to ensure that we're prepared to take a leadership role when light rail comes to the community. In short, by planning early, we can ensure that the changes that are happening to our transportation network can be done in a way that also balances our community's values. So what are these future transit investments and when are they coming? As this committee knows, between 2024 and 25, King County Metro and Sound Transit will begin implementing EastLink Connections project. This is a coordinated regional mobility project that's going to revise existing and add new routes. By doing so, this will improve the speed, reliability, transit service frequencies, and span of service for bus routes in Issaquah. In the longer term, as we look into 2044, Sound Transit's South Kirkland Issaquah Link light rail project is expected to bring new light rail to Issaquah. Giving a little bit more background here, in March 21, Council adopted the Mobility Master Plan, which provides the policy framework and implementation strategies for the transportation element of the city's comprehensive plan. Policy 6.1 of the Mobility Master Plan calls for the development and adoption of a transit study in order to prepare this community for future high-capacity transit. As a side note, the citywide strategic plan also calls for the development of a transit study as action item M3. So now that we've provided that background, we know what we're doing, we know why we're doing it. Let's talk about this project timeline. So in August, the administration selected DKS Associates to lead the development of the study. The project kicked off in September, and after two major phases, we're expecting this project to be complete as part of the comprehensive plan update in 2024. In the first phase, we will be assessing the existing conditions of the current transit system, developing a community engagement plan that involves diverse voices of the community, which we will talk about shortly, estimating future transit needs and considering steps that can be taken to meet our transit service objectives, developing a prioritized list of short-term and long-term transit speed and reliability capital improvement projects with planning level and cost estimates, developing draft goals and policies to update the transit chapter of the Mobility Master Plan. So all that's within phase 1. And then we anticipate starting phase 2 next year, beginning in 2023. And for this phase, we'll be developing a link light rail planning document that guides the city's light rail planning efforts, such as potential station locations, developing transit performance metrics, and developing strategies and projects to improve transit access for underserved populations. And again, once complete, the transit study will be used to update the transit chapter of the Mobility Master Plan, which will be then used to update the comprehensive plan in 2024. Talking a little bit about the financial, policy, and community impacts. This transit study is funded through the 2024 adopted budget. It's anticipated that projects developed through the transit study will likely be added to the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, through 2 phases. In the first phase of this TIP project list, in the first one, we'll be developing projects that are related to transit speed and reliability. We anticipate these again being incorporated into the 2023 TIP. In the second phase, we'll be looking at developing projects and programs aimed at improving accessibility to transit. Lastly, the Link Light Rail planning document, which is largely a strategy document, it's going to guide our future planning efforts as it relates to light rail, and will likely involve some action items that might require funding to implement. Great, so that's the introduction of the study. I was now planning on diving into the community engagement plan, but maybe I'll just pause to see if there's any questions I might address before I continue.
Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you. Thomas, just a general question. Going back to the previous slide about where we are in the process, if you can go back. There we go. Are we, we've got some topography challenges in Issaquah with some of our major neighborhoods on hills, pretty challenging hills and so forth. And where in this transit study will we be looking at those challenges? Is that going to be done under existing conditions, or in the community engagement arena, or where are those challenges going to be outlined when we get the plan back to us?
Yeah, it's a great question, Councilmember DiMichele. We will be looking at those within the existing conditions portion. So that is phase 1, deliverable 1. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that will also come up as we, discuss community engagement options. Accessibility is super important through this, so I'm sure that will be a common theme throughout the project. Okay,
I appreciate that. And then and this relates more to the community engagement plan, but are we, in this planning process, are we taking into account the different neighborhoods? And maybe we can talk about that more when we get to the community engagement plan, but it seems like, we have a number of neighborhoods with pretty unique transit challenges that are particular to them. So where in this plan are we going to be studying those differences?
Yep, again, another great question. Likely considering the needs of the neighborhoods that will be covered a little bit in the existing conditions. We'll certainly touch on those topics moving forward as we look at options that will be addressed in the sort of the future conditions. So that's going to be within the needs assessment.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and continue, please. Thank you.
Great. Perfect. So just diving into the community engagement plan. At a high level, this plan includes several steps. First, we'll be engaging with diverse stakeholder groups. We'll be utilizing multilingual communications platforms to share information, educate the community, and receive feedback. We're also hoping to host a multilingual community open house, as well as several pop-up events at existing community gatherings. These will be where folks are already hanging out, so it'll be a great way to collect feedback in a more organic way. We're also hoping to utilize the city's boards and commissions to gather feedback at project milestones. And lastly, working closely with invested public agency staff such as King County Metro, Sound Transit, WashDOT, and PSRC. Doing this will ensure that the content and deliverables that we develop throughout this project will be done accurately, and it will be done in a very practical, robust, and most importantly, useful way. So the main goal of this whole project is to have useful documents that we can then use to implement other things with. So it'll be great to have other invested public agency staff to help us through that. So going to the key audiences and stakeholders list, which is found in attachment B of agenda item 4.A. Just sort of a summary of what we have here. The key audiences and stakeholders that this study will seek to engage with includes groups and organizations representing current and potential transit users, community business and economic development interest, public agency representatives, seniors, youth, the mobility challenged, and generally the community at large. Moving on to online engagement communications. The staff will also have its own dedicated webpage on the city's website. This is going to serve as the primary source of project information, the landing page, as you were, for most information. The website features include general information and education materials, staff contacts, project and meeting documents, links to surveys and other interactive community feedback tools, and other ways for folks to participate. The city will also use its social media accounts to share project information, promote events and other participation opportunities, and to receive community feedback. Examples of city social media accounts might include Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, and Twitter, just to name a few. This project is also going to utilize email newsletters and event invites to make sure that people are reminded of when activities are happening and ways for them to engage with us. This plan also proposes to hold an online, a open house and multiple pop-up events. At these events, the project team will gather feedback, pose questions to the community, and work with participants to reimagine what it means to be a transit-supportive community. Very importantly, we know that through US Census data that about a third of Issaquah residents speak languages other than English while at home with their families. So it's really important to include multilingual communications as to ensure that other folks can participate in the language that is naturally spoken by them. Additionally, we know that about 9% of residents have self-reported that they don't speak English very well. So knowing this, we'll be providing translation services in Spanish and Mandarin, which are the two major groups of languages and represent the majority of the folks that are of limited English proficiency.
And Thomas, if I could ask a question, going back to the website languages offered, could you just highlight which languages the website will be offered in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the website, there will be a tool that allows for Google Translate. So I believe there's a button that will allow the entire website to be translated into the beyond Mandarin and Spanish. It should be able to translate to the preferred language of the user.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Great. I'll keep moving on, but feel free to interrupt me as I continue. So just sort of wrapping up this slide, the primary goals of the community events are to have representation from diverse voices, people, and interests. We're also hoping to widely promote these events throughout the community with additional outreach to our stakeholder groups. We're also hoping to provide multiple ways for people to participate, including ways for folks who are unable to physically attend meetings or different community events. Most importantly, we're hoping to incorporate all this community feedback to feed it directly back into the planning process. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight the fact that one of the keystones of this project, part of this engagement plan, we're hoping to run these project deliverables through the city's existing boards and commissions to receive feedback throughout the project lifecycle. And the primary board that we're hoping to run this through is the Transportation Advisory Board. The tab will receive regular project updates and will be asked to provide feedback on most of the project deliverables at its monthly meetings. The tab is also going to be invited to participate in other community outreach events as well. So it will be invited to all the events that are open to everybody in the community as well. Secondary to the tab would be the Economic Vitality Commission, the Equity Board, Human Services Commission, and the Planning Policy Commission. These secondary boards and commissions will be provided regular project updates as the project progresses, and the administration would also seek feedback for specific project deliverables. These groups would also be invited to participate in other community outreach events as well, similar to the tab. So just to provide an example of how this might work, for the Link Light Rail planning document, we would be soliciting feedback from the Economic Vitality Commission and the Planning Policy Commission because it's expected that this document would have economic development and land use planning implications. The administration would then take the secondary group's feedback and then give that to the tab, provide that to tab so that the tab can consider any feedback that they may have. Feedback heard to date would then be incorporated into the draft Link Light Rail planning document and then taken to the Mobility and Infrastructure Council Committee for final review. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight this third group, which is all other boards and commissions. We hope to keep them informed as the project progresses. We would also reach out to them to invite them to attend regular community outreach events and use other feedback methods and tools that were previously discussed. So I gave a similar presentation to the tab last week at their October monthly meeting, and I'll just provide you a high level of the tab's feedback from this, and then I'll be asking for your feedback shortly. So overall, the tab was highly supportive of the proposed plan. They also really liked the key audiences and stakeholders list. They thought it was pretty comprehensive. However, they did see that there were some groups that were missing from the stakeholder list that could be expanded upon. These groups included current and potential transit users, such as bicycle rider advocacy groups, additional ethnic cultural groups, youth and senior groups, religious organizations such as churches, temples, and mosques, business and economic development interests such as ethnic chambers of commerce, and other groups that might represent the general community at large. So overall, pretty supportive of the plan, but again, attachment B of your agenda item 4A, there were a couple organizations they were hoping to add to, and they provided that feedback. So now I'm hoping to get the committee's feedback, and to begin, I just wanted to acknowledge two comments that I've received thus far. The first comment was from Councilmember Joe, who requested that we add the Lodging Tax Advisory Council to the stakeholder list. So staff will be sure to add this list to the final draft. And I also wanted to address a comment from Deputy Council President Hall, who requested that we look for ways to directly engage with transit riders, such as installing lawn signs or other sort of media near popular bus stops. So staff will be working directly with Metro and Sound Transit to discuss what options there might be to engage with riders, and we'll certainly look into ways to directly engage with riders near their bus stop. So with those two comments, I'd like to hear whatever other comments that the committee has, and I'll stop here.
Thomas, thank you. A great presentation, and appreciate the thoroughness of the list that has been put together for the community engagement. A couple of thoughts that I had. I appreciate you adding LTAC onto the list. We just had our commission meeting this afternoon, and all the members were quite interested in hearing that feedback and hearing the progress on that. Is there mostly people that are concerned with economic development or hoteliers, both over at the Hilton and the other hotel over there. And so transportation certainly has an impact on the ability for people to come into our city and enjoy the tourist activities and items that are going on. I was wondering if there was any discussion, you mentioned churches, and you put the food bank on there on the list, but I was wondering if there was any discussion of adding Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, because that is the potential new side of the food bank itself in the future. So if we can get the synergy between those two groups and the comments between those two groups, that might be helpful.
Our Savior Lutheran Church.
Oh, Our Savior Lutheran Church, excuse me. Good Shepherd Lutheran Church was in Pocatello, Idaho, and is in my buddy's church. Sorry about that. And let's see, what else was I going to say? Oh, as I drive up and down Squawk, I see a number of people from Hutchinson House, and then there's a senior housing place on either First Place or First Ave and Sunset. And those people are walking all the way to Safeway to get their groceries. When Front Street Market closed down, that really put a pinch on them, and they have to traverse the entire length of Newport Way to get their groceries. I'm wondering if we could reach out to, maybe just talk to the manager at both those places and have a sit down with anyone that's interested and pass out literature there, to kind of get their feedback, kind of meet the seniors where they are as we try to do a little bit of outreach. Another suggestion would be, when we're talking about transit riders, it's great if we could sit at the park and ride on 900 and hand out a survey. We get some of the riders, but my thought was, could we get on the bus at the old Front Street Market there on Front, ride the bus through the city until you get to Target, and pass out the survey to the people that are on the bus and any people that get on the bus. That way we kind of widen our net a little bit in terms of the riders that are actually riding through our city, rather than just the park and ride people that are doing the the quick commute to Seattle or Bellevue for work. So that's just another suggestion to think about as you put together the plan. Other questions? Deputy Councilmember Hall.
Oh, I was actually just going to ask if we should wrap up questions and do public comment before. But great feedback. Yeah. So I have no further questions. Just wanted to make sure we were on track.
Great. Yeah, I kind of jumped ahead. My comments were supposed to be questions, but I was a bad lawyer and didn't make it in the form of a question, and so I'd be out of order if I were in court. My apologies. Okay, we'll go to public comment on this before we go to full discussion. And I don't see anyone in the council chambers right now. Is there anyone online that would like to make comment?
Chair Joe, we have no virtual attendees at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and go to discussion. And I think I've made some of my comments. I'll think if there's something else that comes to mind, I'll bring it up. But Councilmember Hall, you want to start? Deputy Council President Hall, would you like to start? Sorry.
I would be happy to. You okay with that? Okay. Thank you for addressing the question I sent in earlier. Appreciate that. So some quick comments. This is easily, in my opinion, one of the most exciting and impactful initiatives that we have over the next few years. And I'm really excited about it. It's going to give us a great assessment of our community transit needs. It's going to help us prepare for coming light rail and also show initiative to Sound Transit and our transit partners in the region. And I loved this quote in the memo. It'll help us, quote, reimagine what it means to be a transit supportive community. So whoever wrote that, well done. That really resonated with me. So because this is such an important opportunity to get right, I do want to thank you for all staff who touched this, for all their outstanding work and for the quality of work that's gone into this. The scope of work, in my opinion, is thoughtful, is aligned with our strategic goals and our mobility master plan and strategic plan. Our commitment to engaging in the community in English, Spanish, and Mandarin is wonderful. And the key audience and stakeholders lists really does seem to leave no stone unturned. And I was happy to see such an emphasis on youth and diverse communities here. So thank you to the Transportation Advisory Board for their contribution to that list. The only feedback that I have, although I would ditto everything that Chair Joe said, I thought those were good pieces of feedback. I think it might behoove us to include Highlands Council in our list of key audiences and stakeholders lists. They have some close relationships with Highlands businesses and community organizations that could be helpful. The memo describes a plethora of ways the community can engage in this work, but as was already mentioned earlier, I have some concern that we might be missing some active transit users. So based on Thomas's reply to my earlier email question, it sounds like we're going to have staff investigate our options for connecting directly with those users. So I support that action. And then also just generally, as we start to engage with our key audiences and stakeholders, it might make sense and might be prudent to just ask them, did we miss anyone, in terms of your partners in the region, and just be open to kind of editing our list as we go along. Otherwise, I'm very happy with where we're at, and fantastic job.
Councilmember DiMichele.
Oh, thanks. Thomas, this is a really good plan, and I really enjoyed reading through all of it, and you've done a really good job of identifying a lot of the important decision makers and audiences that we need to contact. So I have suggestions, but I want to say first of all that the list is really impressive as you have it right now. I do have a concern about making sure that we differentiate between neighborhoods and that we bring in those voices. So I will plus one Councilmember Hall's comments about including the Highlands Council. And I had a list of other key homeowners associations that I think we should contact. However, I realized because, we have a finite amount of resources and a finite amount of time, and it may not be possible to, meet individually with every HOA in our community, but I'm wondering if we could add them to a distribution list or just make sure that they're notified of the meetings and so that they know. And then maybe when we collect demographic data, we could also ask people to identify what neighborhood in Issaquah they come from so that we start to differentiate. I just think about neighborhoods like South Lake Sammamish, and how different that is from Squawk and how different that is from the Highlands and so forth. And then Old Town, we have some really unique neighborhoods with much different access to transit. So I think that would be important data for the council to know. At the end of the study, how do our neighborhoods identify their access and where the needs are for individual neighborhoods. So I really liked Councilmember Joe's discussion of getting on the buses and riding with the people who are actually riding in Issaquah rather than commuting. It's really easy for us to get those commuters because you could stand out at the transit center, which I have done in years past. But I think that his point is well taken, that it's really important to find out how people who need to get around in Issaquah, their comments and ideas about a transit plan. Let's see. I had some ideas on the business list that you have there. I had included Visit Issaquah, which I believe is part of LTAC. Is Visit Issaquah part of LTAC?
We fund them through LTAC, and their executive director does come to every meeting
Good.
right now. So we could either reach out to her individually and the organization individually and the board there, or give the information through LTAC, depending on the time constraints that staff might have.
Right. So I just think it is important to think about that tourism aspect. A lot of tourists that come to Issaquah are used to having more robust transit services in their own communities. So I think that would be an important voice. I also didn't see on here some of our major businesses like Costco and Rowley Properties and REI. Costco in particular has a big operation and lots of people who commute in and out, and it'd be interesting to know whether or not there would be potential transit services that might serve them. For youth, I was thinking about the Issaquah High Key Club. That's 100 kids at Issaquah High School who are very engaged in the community, and I think would probably love to participate in any kind of survey that you might have. I also want you to think about the Issaquah School District as a representative of youth, but also one of our major businesses. And again, a number of teachers and janitors and counselors and principals and everybody who has to commute in and out of our community. And again, is there any potential for transit services to ease some of that commute or some of the getting around the district? So I think that they would be a great representative of youth and would put you in contact with youth, but they are also one of our largest businesses in Issaquah. So need to look at them that way as well. I would also invite you in the community at large category to consider visiting the Kiwanis Club of Issaquah and maybe also the Rotary Club of Issaquah. We would love to have a program about the transit plan. So next year sometime, if you're ready, contact us. I can connect you with the Kiwanis Club, and Councilmember Joe can connect you with the Rotary Club. So those are just some of my thoughts about the list, but again, very impressive list. And I do understand that our resources and our time are finite and that we have to do that in a strategic way. So please consider those suggestions to think about, but I know that we can't do everything, or we have to be very strategic about how we do the outreach that we do. So I appreciate the work that you put into it so far. Thank you.
Great comments, thank you. I'll go ahead and go and then let Deputy President Hall come back for a second comment. First of all, I do want to try to make your job a little bit easier if we can. The first one on the list, the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce, I believe they still have a government affairs committee that is more focused on local public policy issues. I'm the chamber liaison and for the council. It might be best so that we get a focused group to reach out to the Government Affairs Committee. They'd be more interested or attuned to what is going on from a public policy point of view in the city. So that's one suggestion. The other comment is, I see at the bottom under ethnic groups, the Chinese Information and Service Center, and some people may wonder why that group is on the list. They're located in Seattle in the International District, and I served for 12 years on their board, and they recently celebrated their 50th anniversary. But they do conduct, or did conduct pre-pandemic, a early childhood learning play and learn group in Chinese and English at the library. And so if that group picks up again, it would be very important to reach out to those parents, mothers and fathers that are bringing their kids over there to see if the transit system can serve them better, as well as just reaching out to the executive director at the Chinese Information Service Center in Seattle, as well as they do have both operations here in Issaquah, as I pointed out, in Renton, in Bellevue, and so they're quite in touch with some of the needs of the Chinese community on the east side. overall, I believe, again, this is just a great group to put together. I echo Council Member DiMichelle's comments that please don't think that you have to reach out to everybody, but it's just a suggestion of people that we think would be effective to get the word out as this project gets rolled out. So, Deputy Council President Hall.
Thank you. First and foremost, ditto to everything that was said before. Something Councilmember DiMichelle, when you were talking about neighborhoods and making sure that we're capturing kind of the differences that play out between our unique geography here in Issaquah, made me start to think about, well, do we have any desired goals or targets that we're aiming for in terms of what we're collecting? Like, are we hoping to get an equal number of responses by neighborhood per capita or anything like that? And then that just got me thinking about, do we have any kind of broad goals or targets or desired outcomes that we're looking for? Like, once we've finished all these events, had the survey open for X amount of time, what does success look like? Just having done that, or are we hoping to collect X amount of responses from X kind of... I've lost myself, but Thomas, hopefully you've kind of followed where I was going with that. I'm curious what staff has thought about that.
Yeah, just as like a general, I would say a general comment, the goal of this study is to update the mobility master plan, which is then updating the comprehensive plan. So that's sort of like the hard and fast goal here. But beyond that, we're also hoping to, again, reimagine what it means to be transit supportive, to create a community that really is very supportive of the high capacity transit that we're receiving currently, that we will be getting in the future and beyond. So it's really about creating a culture of transit ridership, considering how transit and the investments that will come will impact the community, and being ahead of all these changes and making sure that the community's values, as they are now and as they are moving in the future, will continue to be reflected in those transit improvements. So there's no hard and fast numbers, I would say, in terms of folks that we're trying to reach. But again, I would say the main goal is to, make sure that we're getting diverse voices in the room, so that we can all make an informed decision based on the collective of the community.
Andrea Snyder.
Thank you. This is Andrea Snyder. Just wanted to add to that answer. Deputy Council President, you asked, how do we know if we're being successful in this public engagement plan? And, Thomas, in the beginning of his presentation, talked about different demographics across the city, talking about what percentage of folks speak a language other than English at home, for example. And I think what we want to do is, as we're engaging the public, collect some of that demographic information to know who we're talking to, what neighborhood they're from, how do they self-identify, and try to track and see how good of a job are we doing in matching who we're able to engage with who we know who's in the community. And so that's something that we'll be taking a look at and tracking. And this is going to be a long process, as you recall from Thomas's timeline. We're looking at not just this year, but also into next year for this process. So that gives us plenty of time to tweak and refine. And we have a lot of options and avenues to explore for engaging the public. And so I think we will continually evaluate and see who are we hearing from, and are we hearing from that representative sample of our community.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. Councilmember DiMichelle.
Thomas, my apologies. I had another question that I meant to ask earlier, so I'll ask it now. Are we defining transit in this transit study as buses only, or are we looking at different mobility options. And the reason I'm asking that question is going back to my comments regarding the school district as a business. If we were to discover, as we do the community outreach, that transit really couldn't serve any of their employees, but perhaps a Metro van program could, would that be part of our transit planning, or would that be a separate discovery? So I know that we want to having a really good, strong transit plan, but I'm just wondering how wide we're defining the word transit.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, transit is typically considered within the realm of what, transit agencies are providing. And these would be options that are accessible to all. So, sort of as a high level, we'd be looking at bus service and light rail, which are sort of the two major types of transit that we either have or will be getting in the future. As we start looking towards the access improvements list, so that's like within the transportation improvement program for 2024, that will be including the other sort of projects and programs that could enhance accessibility to other transit modes. So that might be the opportunity for that. Again, that is in the future. Beyond, it's sort of beyond what we know right now at this time, but we will be looking at ways to have those connections, and that little like Metro van that you're describing sort of falls outside of a typical transit system that's fixed route. And that is more of a special case that might be included within the access improvements portion.
Deputy City Administrator Snyder.
Yeah, thank you. This is Andrea again, just adding to Thomas's response. I think one of the main outcomes that we're hoping to get from this transit plan are a list of capital projects for us to ensure that transit in Issaquah is more accessible. So that's helping with those first and last mile connections. What type of capital projects do we need to consider? Is it additional bike lanes? Is it, crossing improvements, that type of thing as it relates to transit? Is it speed and reliability improvements so we can make it easier for buses to move around our city and navigate intersections, things like that? So we're really focused on not only the planning around the future light rail station and making sure that we're setting up for a local transit system that is coordinated with that regional transit system that will be heavily focused on the light rail station, but also some of these capital projects that make it easier to access transit. And so as we go through this needs assessment and the community engagement, if we find that there are things that we should be considering as a city outside of these capital improvements that are more ongoing, programmatic needs, then that's a list that we should be keeping at the same time, and then looking at those results and talking to council, talking to our transit partners, Sound Transit and Metro, and say, here's what we've discovered. Now where do we go from here, knowing that these are the other needs? And I know we've talked about the idea of a shuttle in these other neighborhoods, or flexible transit-like programming. And so, I think as we discover what these needs are through the planning process, we absolutely want to take those into account and listen to that information from our community. But really, as Thomas was saying, the main focus is what are these improvements that we need to make locally to improve access to transit, to allow transit to move more easily around Issaquah. And that's a focus in our transportation planning and our transportation capital planning that we haven't quite taken so far. So that's really the goal of this project.
Great, thank you. Additional comments from the committee? Okay, so I'll just summarize. It looks like the proposed community engagement plan meets the goals of engaging a diverse set of voices from the community, especially those that have a higher dependence on transit services. And I heard various additional suggestions for community interests or audiences that might be missing from the key audience and stakeholders list. But again, I think the message from the committee is you don't need to contact them all. These are just merely suggestions of people that we believe might be helpful to add as the whole sum of voices on this project. Okay. Zay, do you need any other feedback from the committee at this time? Okay, that's great. That then takes us to our next item, which is adjournment, but just check quickly, anything for the good of the order that,
I'm sorry, Chair Joe. For a special meeting, there's no good of the order.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, this is a special meeting because it got added a little bit late. It's on a committee of the whole night. So our parliamentarian has spoken, so we are now adjourned. It's 7:33.